So many of you track, particularly with your state. And many of you may have these things called cooperative agreements, which legally act like contracts but have the more flexibilities, more similar to a grant. Another way to think about this is to think about where the agency is purchasing a service from a single entity. So, for example, they're looking for someone to operate their LIHEAP program across the state. It could be that they are, as more commonly, looking for a number of grantees applying for the same thing. And it's important to recognize those differences before you actually start applying. And I'm going to get back to this point in just a minute. First of all, it's tempting to apply to anything that comes across your desk. Particularly given the uncertainty and given what we don't know, it's highly likely that you're going to want to apply. It looks like something new, let's apply. The problem, it actually takes a lot of work to apply, and it takes a lot of work to apply to win. What we really want to do is to invest our limited resources and applications to the places we can be most successful. So I've got about 10 points to think about before you even start putting pen to paper. The first is, what's the strategic fit of this project within the scope of your mission? Obviously, if you see an RFP for building roads, well, someone might go, job opportunities. Most of you are not going to go after a bid to look at building roads. So the first thing you want to do is, does it strategically fit? And as we talk about competing well, that strategic fit matters because it's going to be part of how you sell yourself. In a more competitive environment, it's not going to be enough to just comply with the RFP. The second point is your relationship with the funder. Is there who knows your work or knows a member of your staff or knows you and already sees you in a positive light? Or is this absolutely cold? When we talk a funding cycle, I'm going to suggest that you try to make sure you're not applying for things cold, because you will do better when you already have a positive relationship. And so I would encourage you to build relationships early with people you are hoping to get funding from. But when you sit down and apply, you want to assess that, right? If you have no relationship, that makes the application slightly more risky than if you have a great relationship. If you completely blew your last grant and you haven't rebuilt a relationship with that agency, this may not be what you want to go after. So we want to assess the relationship before you move forward. That's the competitive landscape. And by that is, who else is applying for this money? Are there 6 agencies in your community who are all going to go after that Head Start program? Or are you the only game in town? Is the guy going to pick 4 or 5 organizations or 10 organizations? And so even if there's 6 in your community, you're going to stand out well. Who else is out there? The other question is, how competitive is this particular funding stream? And you can find that out by simply finding out how many people applied last year for a repeat application. So what you want to do is understand if the ratio, if 5 people applied for every grant that was given last year, you've got a 20% chance of winning right off the bat. 10 people, did that drop to 10%? So part of what you want to know is not who are the other competitors in your community, but how likely is it a win? Again, the thing where your 1 in 5 wins is a lot more attractive than the one where 1 in 10 wins. Next, what differentiates you? In that example where there are 6 agencies in your community who could apply for work, what makes you different? So on the Head Start example, because I think that's one that many people are facing or will face over the next couple years, and it's one that most people understand even if they don't operate Head Start. One of the things that community action brings to the table that's different than the other kinds of organizations that apply for Head Start funding is the capacity to serve those families more broadly. So like the school system or the local church that have capacity around education or have capacity around volunteerism and community engagement, or make capacity specifically around educational standards, community action has the opportunity to bring all of those things together with all of the other kinds of supports that low-income ways of, young children may need. And one of the things that would differentiate the community action agency and the community in applying is actually that capacity to serve the family. I think there are situations in the country where there's more than one community action agency who might be looking at a Head Start program. So let's think about what some of the other kinds of differentiators are. What relationships do you have in the community that you're able to bring to the table, and are they different than the ones of your predecessors? What kinds of supports do you have that perhaps others don't? What are the unique skills that you have? Your Head Start director was a Head Start kid, for example, and that makes that person intimately more knowledgeable about what it means to serve those families. You want to make a really good list about what makes you different, and your capacity to do that, again, tells you whether or not this is something you should apply for. If you can't come up with a list of things that make you different than the other 6 agencies in your community, this may not be where to make your investment. What's your past performance been like? Does the fund know that you're successful? Do you have a history of serving similar families or similar programs? Again, you're going to want to identify what are the best past performance pieces you have that most relate to the program that you're applying for. So when you tell the story of why you're best, part of it is what makes you different, and part is what you've already demonstrated. And most community action agencies have a very long history, and most community action agencies have tons of things they could pick for past performance. What we want to focus on are those things that help tell your story better. So this is another point we're going to come back to when we talk about responding, but you want to pick the past performance that best demonstrates your capacity to do the next thing. Execution. What are 2 things? There's 6 other things at the same time. Do you have the time to execute this application well? In which case, you're great. You've got 6. Which are the ones that are going to have the highest probability of winning, will provide the most flexible revenue for your organization, right? You want to you want to create a stable, growing organization. So where are the best likelihoods of winning? So execution means executing on the proposal. It also means executing on the work. So if you're an agency that has never served young children and never provided early childhood education, is it reasonable to believe that you're going to be able to build that capacity fast enough on the grant? And if we're talking about applying for Head Start, and that's new, one of the things that's good about Head Start is once you win that, it's a fairly stable marketplace again for a period of time. It may be worth doing what it takes to ramp up. And you want to ask the question, can I get the proposal done well? Can I deliver on the work? Future potential. So there are grants that you have applied for where it's a one-off, right? You got an 18-month grant. It's a one-time thing. And the hit is that agencies who get it this year don't get it next year because an organization is wanting to spread the work around the country. Full appropriation, likelihood of future wins. Way of thinking about it. Here's how long is the project to begin with. Applying for an 18-month project is really, really different than applying for a 5-year project. You have your project, you've got something you can count on for 5 years. So if you're sitting there and you're looking at, and given that it's the summer, my bet is you are looking at more than one funding opportunity to apply for, one thing you're going to want to think about is this one's 18 months, that's 5 years. We've got equal likelihood of winning. Guess what? You're going to go after the longer grant. The risk to applying. In terms of the investment that your organization is making in your application, by the kind of time you have to put in, by the relationships you have to build, by the kinds of subcontracts and those kinds of relationships. What's the risk going forward? If you win this particular process, does that shut you out of something else? Or does it actually support that? So again, you want to assess the risk piece. you want a really good look at the proposal. And we'll talk when we actually talk about, at the proposal. The request for proposal is what this actually should say. Eligible for that funding, what's it going to take to get this proposal done in the time allotted? And different from execution, it's really, do you have all the puzzle pieces? It's not to write to it. Many have hired grant writers. I'm going to suggest that if you ever do that, you have a fairly strategy conversation beforehand, but you can figure out how to get a proposal written. The question is, do you have all the component parts? So you want to take a good long look at the request for proposal and make sure you've got all the puzzle pieces before you start. And lastly, can you price to win? Can you price your response to this request in a way that makes you competitive with your competition? I'm not suggesting that you lowball it. I'm not suggesting that you have to be the cheapest one. But if you are looking particularly at contracts in the federal government world of contracts, you got within 10% of the lowest. Most government projects are content is scored separately, technical is scored separately from funding. That actually does matter some. So at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to price yourself within the marketplace in order to win. If you did all 10 of those things, then all 10, and your answer to all 10 questions is let's go forward, then you move forward. If you've got some places in the middle, it's definitely worth taking the time to think of what else is going on and whether that's the best use of your time. Again, most of the time I decide to go forward on things. I only do it when I actually know what the risk of that investment is. This time to take some questions before we move on.
If you guys want to either raise your hand if you have a question, then I can respond to you that way. Or we can just have a review to everybody, and everybody somebody can just go ahead and say that they, whatever their question is. Does anyone have a question?
Yeah, I do.
Someone had a microphone. Then I didn't have to use my phone. Start rate.
Okay, that's Sonia. Sonia? Did you have to?
No.
Okay, so I guess there's no questions off the top.
So you need to learn more about it, so I can start helping out in those little.
Okay, well, if we don't have any questions, we'll go ahead.
I just want to get even the small ones.
The government agency will go through before the process of putting a request for proposal and in the process of awarding one. So the first thing that happens is identify a problem, or maybe Congress has, but they identify a problem they want to solve or a service that they think the communities need. Looking at solutions. So for example, in the discretionary CSBG announcements every year, there's a fair amount of range around what kinds of things get funded. So at a period of time where there was an interest in encouraging marriage and fatherhood, there were grants around those things. There's flexibility about what could actually be done. So the government agency at this stage has to decide how they want to scope out the needs that they've got, right? They describe what they think they're looking for. They issue a request for proposal. So that's out. Then typically we all go to get ourselves in gear and we write a proposal and we submit it and it gets scored. Some particularly more in the contract world than in the grant world, but also particularly if there's some that are close together, you may find a situation where you're asked for best and final, and then a contract's awarded. Most of our years, most of the time, entered this cycle at request for proposal stage. One of the things that you want to do is actually start the conversation earlier between identify a problem and design the solution they're going to put in the RFP. Now, that actually applies for most of you more at your state or local level, but you want talking to your potential funders when they're thinking about what they're going to ask for. Because times I can't imagine that anybody on the phone has ever thought the government application was asking for something stupid. No one else ever thought that, right? We've all done it. Part of the problem there is that from where they sit, they don't know. They haven't had a conversation with someone about what it's going to take to answer something. And they're going to propose a solution that you don't like. Now, just in case you're wondering, at the end of the day, you went and fix it. You respond based on what they've asked for. You really want to influence what they ask for as early as you possibly can. In having those conversations, they also are looking for your response. So you're building that relationship before there's a proposal on the street, because as soon as there's a proposal on the street, they can't talk to you, and they won't talk to you for the most part. So get in there early. We're going to spend a lot of time on the request for proposal after that, this part of the conversation, but proposals are then scored, and I use that word on purpose. This is a game of points. This is a game. This is actually a bit of a game. At the end of the day, the only thing a government program can look at, the only things a government program evaluator can look at, is the request proposals that you responded to and the proposal you submitted. At the federal, and I suspect at every level, they cannot go online and Google you, cannot go online and Google your staff. They cannot go online and look at your website. They can only judge you based on the proposal you submit. So your goal is going to be to get as many points in that proposal as you can. If they come back to you for a best and final conversation, you want to listen really, really carefully to the things they ask. One of the things actually that I think we didn't talk about in terms of risk and competition is incumbency. When you're thinking about who are my competitors, one of the questions you want to ask about competitors is whether there's anyone who already has this project and is an incumbent. I tell you, I have learned in the best of the way that you can beat an incumbent. My first proposal did. And what that means is I never rest on my laurels. I always think I can lose, and I go after every point as if it's the very first time. And I listen to a best and final conversation because there's a lot of clues. So what happens in a best and final conversation is the government comes back to you and says, we have a question. Sometimes they'll do this in writing, and sometimes they'll do this face-to-face, but they'll give you a list of questions. And you want to pay attention to what the questions are, because they're trying to differentiate and they're trying to make a decision. So when someone asks if something is more expensive, one of the things you really want to understand, and it's why you wanted to talk to them early, is whether they're asking because they don't want to leave money on the table and they want to award all the money they have, or are they asking if something's too expensive, if something doesn't cost more because they want to lower your price to separate you from the competition. You don't want to lower your price unless you know, because you don't want to make it easier for them to give it to somebody else. So that's one example of listening in the best and final piece. I've also had the situation where they said things like, none of our staff have gotten raises in a number of years, to a proposal that we had built in the raises, for the anticipated raises. That's a big hint to not move forward, to take out those escalators. So you want to listen really well in the best and final process. At the end of that process, they're going to make awards for contracts or grants. Some people you're going to go celebrate. For the people who don't ever not get debriefed. There's two reasons you want to get debriefed. You want to ask for your scores. You want to learn you could have done better, number one. Two, you want a relationship. If you didn't have the relationship before, that debriefing opportunity is the opportunity to show people that, okay, now I understand, I should have included that. Or really meant this and it wasn't clear. Or simply learn how confident you are by the questions you ask in that debriefing process. So I want to make sure if you don't win that you ask for the debrief. It looks like there's some questions, and so I think we'll stop now and take those before we move on.
Okay. So I have a question from, text first one from Ella. Ella Slay? Do you see a question?
No, I did not.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. About you, Wayne Thompson, do you still have a question? Okay.
Can you just sit in there? Can you just go off?
So how about Randy Reagan? Do you still have a question?
Seven or 9 people.
Randy, are you still there?
Yep.
Do
Yes,
you
I'm
still
here.
have a question?
Hold on.
Good afternoon. I was just asking, is this a federal overview of the funding cycle?
This is the funding cycle just in any government agency for the most part.
Right.
Federal funding cycle, the things that we can talk about the specific to federal here is about timing, right? This gives me an opportunity to say something that I think is kind of important, although I think many people already know. The business of when contracts are awarded, contracts have to be awarded by the federal government by September 30th, period, or the money goes away. It goes to the Treasury. So where we're in this cycle from the federal perspective is that we're seeing the RFPs hit the street right now. They have to be decided by the end of September. In state and local, in state government, that may be the same cycle, or it in fact may be a cycle that's driven usually July 1st through the end of June, or regular calendar year, and those are the sort of 3 kinds of cycles. This is a cycle regardless. You've got a problem, and you have to decide what you think the solution is. You have to put out a proposal to get bids. You have to review those bids. You may have a negotiation, and then you're going to award a grant or contract.
Okay.
And just checking to see if Clinton still had a question.
Situation to her?
Okay. Jennifer Potts, I should say. Have a question?
I think it's very helpful.
Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and mute everybody back, and Julie's going to go ahead with the rest of the presentation.
Thanks. I want to go into 2 particular things that are specific to government. But it's the kind of analysis you would want to do for any funder, and that around that relationship thing, right? First is, what do they want and what do they need? And understanding what that is. So, for example, we're going to talk about other kinds of funders in 2 weeks, but the federal government has and the state and local government have a need that has to do with constituents and being responsive and a formal legal obligation to serve. As a foundation who has an interest that's been by the foundation, the folks who established the foundation. In the government sector, they're trying to meet a need that is likely to have been legislated, and they're to be responsive to a population that interacts with them, right? So as people are talking, about issues of funding and protecting funding, want constituents to respond. So this whole what do they want and need is really important. For the most part, the government agencies we work with want competent responses to provide services in ways that both help people and don't cause crises and don't put the agency in the newspaper. They want you to do what you said you were going to do. They want you to meet needs as best you can, and they want to know that they've invested their money in an agency that's going to do that without compromise, without problem, right? The second piece of this is, who do they trust? Do they trust nonprofits? Do they trust faith-based organizations? Do they trust your executive director or your program director? Understanding who that is and becoming one of the people they trust is part of that conversation that you've had across the cycle. And if it isn't you can cycle anywhere. It's just the funding decision is always going to be in the federal case late September of that year. But you want to enter that cycle and begin to build that trust relationship early, because again, they want to know services are going to be delivered well, and they want to know that they can rely on you to understand what their needs are. You part of that trust to be clear about how can you help, how you bring to the table. Perhaps they have an issue. We often see this with the role of the state associations and the state. Clearly mandating and legislated to serve the community. They care about these programs for the most part. The conversations with legislators that could be really helpful that they probably can't have. Sometimes can do that for them. Their agency sometimes can do that for them. So how can you help them support you and support these programs, and how can you help them over time? I heard a mentor of mine say many years ago that if you ask people for money, you get advice. Ask them for advice, you get money. I think we have a tendency, particularly with government funders in general, to only talk to them when we want something, when we want them to hire us. Building a relationship is actually about seeing what they need and offering to be helpful when you don't want anything. And that creates an opportunity. One of the opportunities it creates is to help shape the solution. If you've had the opportunity to talk to them about what their hopes are for a project or a problem they're trying to solve, and they trust you, you have the opportunity to shape the solution. How flexibility goes into that solution? How much does that solution play to the things your agency offers? How do you help shape that? And that's about building that relationship. I want to talk about is what the world looks like to a government agency in general. Our work, there's an issue about wanting to serve people well and them within the legal boundaries. So, for example, we want to make sure that we aren't not serving someone who's eligible for services. We don't want to serve folks who are not. I think a recent example that's been on my radar is, in fact, there are exactly 3 cases of stamp recipient lottery winners ever. And food stamps, if you don't know, or SNAP actually, benefits you for on a 6-month basis. So if it's the lottery in month 5 and doesn't cancel their SNAP benefit by month 6, in month 1, so say they're in the lottery in month 1 and they don't tell the SNAP office that they don't need SNAP anymore by month 2, guess what? They'll get an extra month of food stamps. That's the newspaper. Everybody thinks everybody on food stamps is a winner. And it becomes a big public problem for that agency. So one of the issues they have is they want to stay out of the paper. They want to deliver services legally. They want people to be safe, and they don't want to be embarrassed. This funding process, they need to operate a fair process. They need to apply the same standards every time to everyone. Right? So if you were to look at any RFP from the Action for Children and Families right now, you would see an enormous similarity across them. You would see things that are word for word the same. you would see the order of sections exactly the same, because the idea is they want it to be predictable and fair and only change where it has to ensure that they have run a process that's transparent and legal and not based on friends or nepotism or whatever. The fairness of the process is a major driver. Time of the decision. What I said about September 30th applies to the federal government. If they don't award that money by September 30th, it goes away. Now, some time pressure all the way back through the cycle. So not so much this year, but last year, when we were talking about, about a little earlier than this time last year, we kept talking about the debt ceiling, about not having appropriations, and the appropriations for the year currently in were not made until April. So instead of the decision being made in October and having 12 months to execute the RFP process, some agencies had 6. Means that things got rushed out the door, things got written very quickly, things had very tight timelines because at the end they had to make the decision by September 30th, period. Now, government is not much different. State government has money appropriated by a legislature that evaporates at the end of the fiscal year in. So you have to decide by the right moment at the end. So the reason that sometimes you find that you get 45 days to reply and sometimes you only get 30 or sometimes you get 60, they give you time, but they back out the time it takes to go through the review process and make the award. So that's the issue of the timeliness factor. They need a uniform process. It needs to be fair and it needs to be uniform. It needs to be predictable. So you're going to we'll see RFPs. If you haven't already gone to grants.gov, that's where the federal site is. And I would look at a couple just for the sake of learning what the standard pieces are and what they aren't, and how you do this. Because the way you compete to win are those 10 questions at the beginning about should you bid, and the next piece is that you want to write a compliant or simply competitive proposal. You want to write a compelling one. What I mean by that is if you simply check off the points and it says you must send a person to Washington, you write a sentence that says we are prepared to send a person to Washington, you've written a compliant proposal. You want to be competitive, you want to think about those earlier questions, and you want compelling. You want to tell a great story about what your agency is going to do to more than comply, but excel at what you're doing. When I see request for proposal is it's a compliant place, but then we're going to build out from there. So a matrix of what are the compliance issues. Those are things like who's eligible. Am I really eligible? Do I have to submit? Do I have to submit the contracts with subcontractors or letters of obligation? Do I have to submit loan documents? Do I have to submit my lease? Can I do all of those things? All of that kind of stuff. The other piece is the new basics. A restriction on number of pages. Are there style requirements like Roman 12 point with margins double spaced? You got all of a list of all of the things that absolutely must be done. What must be done to be evaluated. So if you're not eligible, they ain't going to read it. Okay? If you have 200 pages and the restriction is 100 pages, I have seen agencies throw pages 101 to 200 away and not read them. Agencies not read anything that didn't comply with the 100-page limit. You got it. You have to do to actually be read. The part of that is what are the requirements for each point? Most proposals will list the number of points for each section, and they'll have sentences that describe exactly what you have to do. What are the things you absolutely must do? And so in those cases, I'm thinking about things like, is there a match requirement? If there's a match requirement, are there restrictions on what that match can be? Can you use other federal money, for example? Can you have in-kind contributions? Also is what time, on what day, in what way is this proposal due? Can it be in hard copy or only electronically? Is it due 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock? I can't tell you the number of times I've known of agencies who got, when you did it in hard copy, who got to the building 2 minutes too late. Gone. Electronically, there are plenty of cases where everyone submitted in the last 5 minutes, and that's 300 people submitting simultaneously, and they couldn't get through the system fast enough. So those times, and it sounds like it really should all be about your great project, but again, there's a uniform and fair process. Everyone has to have the same set of rules. So the compliance matrix is really about the rules. And I suggest you get all the little stuff done immediately. That means registering to submit electronically. That means sending the representations and certification sections to the people that need to sign them. That means starting to work on your support letters when you start writing the RFP. That means drafting them to the people, if you need to, for the people who are supporting them. I'm sorry, 30 or 15 minutes. I'm sorry, we're looking at time for a second. Okay. Well, we've got plenty of time here. All right. So you want to meet all those compliance requirements. You do the electronic submission early. You want to do all of those things. You do the competitive analysis. For competitors, what do they have that you don't, and you have that they don't? You want to be able to highlight the things you have, and you be able to answer the question of what you don't have. So if you, for example, have done early childhood, but you have not a NACE accredited preschool, you haven't done Head Start before, the question is going to be, can you meet all of the performance requirements? You want to go ahead and say, no, we haven't been tested on this, but we actually use those standards to what we're already doing. You want to be very, very clear about the competitive analysis piece. Lastly, on the strategic side, you want to talk about what are the win themes. What are the sentences you're going to use repeatedly that highlight your strengths? And what is that highlight your strengths that you can use repeatedly throughout the proposal? Next up, what's the story you're going to tell? The story is really, you're going to write your proposal. We are a fabulous agency located in the community with great relationships, and we show you how we can help the folks you want to serve be successful. Here's how we're going to do it. Tell a story. Have examples. Have pictures and stories of the people you've served in the proposal. You just tell them what you're going to do. You're going to show them the evidence that you're going to do it. Here's our report on the standards that we've met this year. We have a highly rigorous standard establishment. Here's what one family said about what we did for them. Show the evidence. Don't just tell it. Text for illustration, but also for space. So I've become a master in how to cram information into 100 pages and make it readable. Oftentimes the rules for double spacing don't apply to a table. Can you illustrate something rather than write a long paragraph about it? And how do you use graphics that are compelling? That's something you can start really early in the process, and most of us wait till we've got the thing written. If you can have that conversation with the folks who are going to design those graphics for you at the very beginning, you can be working on them while you're writing. You want to write to the evaluators. Again, the evaluators get two things only. That's the RFP you're responding to and your proposal. I'll give an outline in a second. I'm going to suggest that you use that outline. You use the evaluation section of the request for proposal to serve your response. And if it asks for something more than once, you're going to write it more than once. At the end of the day, you are not winning a Pulitzer Prize. You're earning points. So great writing is good. Telling the things that earn points repeatedly Every time it's asked for, in every section it's asked for, if it's asked for in 2 sections, you're going to write about it in 2 sections. Not because it's great reading, but it makes it much easier for an evaluator to score it. Also, it's meant you can learn who the evaluators are, either individually or by type, right to who they are. So if you know that you're submitting an economic development proposal and the evaluators are likely to have financial background, make sure that the writing about the financials is really good. If you think that's the key to your success, but you know you're writing for folks who are not in the business world, use common language to describe what it is that you're doing. So write to the evaluators. I'm going to all these real fast. The structure of every ACF, Administration for Children and Families, federal proposal are these 8 sections. You'll notice 3 of them are in red. Those are 3 you care most about. Go right to them. Go to eligibility first. Am I eligible to apply for this? I can't do that. Don't do that. Go right to evaluation request. Go right to the eligibility section. The application and submission information, what to do and when to do, and review section. That's where the points are. That's how you're going to structure it. After you've gone over all of those, go back up to funding opportunity description. That is one of the places that the agency can describe things. In a section on application and submission information, you may find additional information. There's a definition section. You want to read it. I am an arrogant jerk who's applied for grants for 20 years, and I think I know the English language, and I don't need to learn what is means. Got news for you. If they want is to mean something specific, the only place they can tell me that is in the definition section. So read the definitions for how the terms are being used in this particular case. It's one of the places the agency has flexibility. Very little flexibility in the application submission section, even though it will tell you the kinds of things the proposal is being to deliver. They are, for the Administration for Children and Families, they're checkboxes they select into the proposal. Not much flexibility. The review part, however, is where most of it is. Those sections you read to decide whether you're going forward. Once you know whether you're going forward, then you need to go back through the whole thing and get all of the details for that compliance matrix. Again, like a reviewer, and for the most part, this is the outline that reviewers get in the review section of the proposal. The need assistance. What's the problem? You can probably already have from other proposals. You could be working that now. And before you see an RFP. The benefit of the project. Community action would be great at this, right? We talk about results. We know how to talk about results. And you want to tie the benefits to the needs. So how are we going to solve that need by this project? Statement of work or project plan is usually where most of the points are. You're going to go through, if it says you have to do something, you have to do it. If it says you should do something, guess what? People who say do it are like get more points, right? It's a suggestion. Again, particularly around federal grants, there's a limits because of the paperwork, Reduction Act, and some other rules about what they can require. But if they, suggest something, assume you have to do it. If you can't, say why not or why you don't believe it should be done. But I would expect must be done and should probably must be done. If it requires an evaluation, read the evaluation requirements. The likelihood is if it requires an evaluation, it's looking for a third-party evaluator. You want to make sure you have a credible third party, and you're going to want to make sure you have an evaluation design that works. Again, a piece that somebody can be working on while you're writing the rest of them. Organizational experience and personnel are the other 2. Organizational experience, you can write lots of stuff about your agency. My bet is you have 187 times, and you will be tempted to cut and paste something you've done before in spot. Again, tailor it both to the review and to this project. So great success in job creation does not necessarily help you earn a Head Start grant. So what kinds of organizational experience most apply? Personnel. If you already know who's doing the work and you have staff that meet every criteria listed in that proposal, use them. If not, tell how you're going to find them, right? What are the standards you're going to hire around? Where you find people, what expectations do you have of them, how fast are you going to find them, and how are you going to get started before you get them? Because particularly if you're applying for an 18-month grant, you got 18 months. You do not have 6 months to find the right person. So you're going to go ahead and manage those things. Again, like an evaluator. And in fact, I would say if you have the opportunity to actually be an evaluator, the best grant and contract competition experience you could possibly ask for. I've said this before earlier, I think it's actually absolutely crucial. You need to celebrate no matter what. These are enormously hard pieces of work. I don't know who thinks summer is easy. Those of us who depend on federal grants, in August we're busy writing. Tell us effort. Win or lose, use it as the opportunity to debrief. Find out what you could have done better. The relationship, learn and reapply. Now, I'm on every side of this, and I tell you, I have seen great agencies who perform incredibly well, write lousy proposals. And nothing I can do. The reviewer, the agency, I have to find it in the proposal. If it's not there, it doesn't count. I personally know that an agency created 100 jobs in their community, built rental thing for 200 people. If not in the proposal, there's nothing I can do. So, end of the day, it is about earning the points. It's about knowing where they are. It's about telling a good story. So you take meeting compliance. So if we went back to that slide, meeting compliance gets you to the table. Oh, come on, this is too hard. Meeting compliance and filling out your compliance matrix will get you to the table. Going through and earning the points. Will make it competitive. Putting that in a compelling story with clues that are easy for the reviewers to find is how you actually win. You want to make it easy for your reviewer, and you want to make it interesting for your reviewer. Because guess what? Your reviewer just downloaded. If there's 100 pages, a page limit, they're reading 1,000 pages in 3 days and scoring them. They're probably reading this in addition to their day job in the middle of the night. So you make it compelling in addition to compliant and competitive. I hope this is helpful. We have about 5 minutes left, so let's see what kind of questions we have, and we'll either address them today or work them into the second half of this that we're doing 2 weeks from today.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? I don't see anyone's hand raised so far.
If you're not associated for Head Start.
Yeah, you can't be working.
Nick, do you still have a question? Or
To replace, it's all controlled.
You get the request, or you have to request the debriefing from the funder.
You usually have to request it. So typically, my experience is I have never gotten a federal award before September 26th.
A couple days in between.
I'm hearing lots of stuff. I'm not sure so I've gotten an award before September 20-something. If it's October 3rd and you haven't heard, you didn't win. And I would be immediately emailing the contact person at the program and just check in. Just wanted to see. And, I understand we didn't win. I'd love to find out more. I'd love to see what our scores might look like, and I'd love to, hear what you have to say. In most cases, the agency will give you something in writing. Reviewers essentially have to justify their scores, so they will have written sentences about strengths and weaknesses, and you can get those. My suggestion is that you get them, look at your proposal, and then I would actually ask to talk to a program specialist because it's the opportunity to build a relationship around that. And say, would this have been better? Or, what might have been helpful? Does that get at it for you?
Yes, thank you so much.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. I'd like to go way back to before the RFP is released. You mentioned real briefly about making comments when you have the opportunity when they open it up. Comments. Do you really feel that that's looked and makes a difference?
Absolutely.
And that we have all our personal people in place.
And if you can do it in a constructive way, it's actually really helpful. I can't speak to it from the state perspective. I can speak to it from the federal and from the local perspective. They have to put those out, but there's also very public record of your comments. So they have to actually look at it, and they have to respond to the transparency requirements. And part of it is that, at the end of the day, they want stuff to work. And if so there's two cases where they ask for a comment. Either there's a requirement, so they're dealing with OMB criteria. They have to know that. Secondly, another is when they actually want to know. There are other reasons they would do it. So I've seen, particularly on the contract side, you'll do something for sources. So they want to make sure somebody's going to be able to compete. Have an idea of what that's going to happen. The other thing is I've also seen, this contract, not grants, they're looking for a specific thing on the contract side where they get the opportunity to limit the number of applicants. The number of applicants ends up being the people who actually ask questions. That said, when you ask questions in the grant piece, I want to talk about being strategic about it. The things you want to be careful about is you don't want to ask questions that you don't want the answer to. Right? You don't want to give somebody an opportunity to create restrictions that already exist. So you want to be careful in asking those questions. But, for example, if you went to the OCS CED Community Development site right now, those proposals were due on Tuesday. You'll see a long list of questions and answers. Every single question that came in was answered by my team, and OCS was posted. And there were long conversations about a number of the questions that were asked. So they absolutely answered. They absolutely get shared. They absolutely matter. The one caution is that you want to think through a question that could get you an answer that makes it hard for you to actually do the work.
Okay. Thank you.
We have come to the end of our webinar. And know that can email questions to Julie at iLeadstrategies.com.
Our website and get it.
We'll be providing the presentation on our website at CED.org.
Click on.
As you will be able to register for Part 2, which is on June 21st. So we'll be able to hear from Julie again, and as she has up there, you'll be able to really delve into how the process actually works. So hopefully you all enjoyed the webinar, and I will ask you to do the evaluation at the end, so you'll have an opportunity to give us some feedback, and we really appreciate that. So, thank you guys so much for attending.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.